Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. So Amazon has come out with an update for their Project Kuiper satellite broadband service, including what the customer terminals are going to look like, the sizes, and what it's going to cost them to make that. Be right back. Thanks for joining me, Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So saw this article. It's providing some information on what Amazon's going to be doing with their Project Kuiper satellite service. So this is going to be something that's going to be competitive to Starlink, as well as any other broadband operator. So they're getting into the low Earth orbit satellite business, similar to what Starlink has done, although Starlink's got a big head start on them. Amazon is coming in second, although they've had time by doing that to work on technology. So they've got some interesting things coming out with their terminals, and there's also some information about timing and what we can expect is when this will be available. So you see here they unveil 3 satellite user terminal plans, or terminals and plans for broadband service in 2024. So these are the 3 terminals, the 3 sizes that they've got. Let's see, I think, has this got the 3 different pictures? Maybe not. Okay, so Amazon has designed 3 satellite broadband user terminals and will start offering internet service in 2024. The company announced today the standard terminal designed for residential and small business customers is expected to cost Amazon less than $400 to make, which is quite a bit less than what Starlink, especially what they first were costing them. Now, I don't know if that $400 is going to be in production with lots of quantity, because Starlink had to get production up in order to get prices down and make some tweaks, those kinds of things. But so $400 is not bad. Amazon did not say what it will charge customers for the terminals or for the monthly service plans. The standard customer terminal measures less than 11 inches square and 1 inch thick, weighs less than 5 pounds without its mounting bracket, delivering speeds of up to 400 megabits per second. Amazon expects to produce these terminals for less than $400 each. So 400 megabits per second, that remains to be seen. They've done some tests with a geosynchronous satellite, and they've got those kinds of speeds. You would expect it to be faster at low Earth orbit, although as we've seen from Starlink, I don't think they've ever done much better than over 100 megabits per second. So, and that was even when you had very few customers on a new constellation, a new set of satellites that they had launched. So I don't know about the 400 megabits per second. We'll have to see if there's something special about what they're doing. As far as distance-wise, they're very similar to where Starlink's going to be. Whether our customers actually get those speeds in practice will depend on the satellites and how congested the network is in each region, as the experience of SpaceX Starlink customers shows. And again, when SpaceX would launch, they would be over 100 megabits per second. They might be 120, maybe even up to 150 megabits per second. And then as they added customers, that more customers accessing the satellites in that area as they were going overhead, then speeds would drop under 100 megabits per second. So it kind of would go up and down as they'd get more customers, then they'd launch more satellites into the constellation, and then have speeds would go up a little bit. So they're kind of experiencing that now. They were never anywhere near 400 megabits per second. Amazon didn't differentiate between the download and upload speeds in its announcement, but upload speeds are likely to be slower than downloads. And that's the way it's going to be, because people need the download bandwidth. So that's what they're going to do. It's not bidirectional. It's not symmetrical. It's basically the way they do the service would be more like a cable modem service, where you're, as far as I know, where you're taking a certain amount of the spectrum and using that for download and a certain amount for upload, and you're going to use a larger slice of that for download. And in fact, Starlink, when you're looking at their speeds, they're somewhere around 10 to 20, I think, megabits per second on the upload. So it's quite a bit lower, and I'm sure Amazon's going to be the same. There will also be a smaller terminal that's even cheaper to produce. A square design, weighs a pound, only 1 pound, and measures 7 inches, while providing lower speeds of up to 100 megabits per second. Amazon said it will connect residential customers who need an even lower cost model, as well as government and enterprise customers pursuing applications like ground mobility and Internet of Things. So that's interesting that they'll have a smaller, less costly terminal, and they'll provide lower speeds to be able to provide a lower cost service. A larger terminal, measuring 19 inches by 30 inches, which will be able to provide speeds of up to 1 gig, is designed for enterprise, government, and telecommunications applications that require even more bandwidth. These terminals use hang on a second. Oh, here's the 3 pictures. So this is the This is the standard one. You see there's a cardinal, so it kind of gives you an idea of the size. Then they've got their got the little one right here, the little square one. And then they've got this big one here that they're talking about, or that we just talked about. The terminals use Amazon's Prometheus chip. The terminals will use Amazon-designed broadband chips that combine the processing power of a 5G modem chip found in modern smartphones, the capability of a cellular base station to handle traffic from thousands of customers at once, and the ability of a microwave backhaul antenna to support powerful point-to-point connections. Amazon calls the custom chip design Prometheus. It will also be used in Project Kuiper's satellites and ground gateway antennas, allowing the system to process up to a terabyte of traffic on board each satellite, terabit per second. Amazon's Project Kuiper division has been planning a network of low Earth orbit satellites since at least 2019, aiming to eventually challenge the SpaceX Starlink service. That's already operational. Starlink raised the price of its standard terminal from $4.99 to $5.99 last year, and it was costing them way more than that to produce it. And more recently announced a monthly service price increase for users in limited capacity areas. Starlink's new prices are $120 a month for residential users in those congested network areas and $90 a month for people in excess capacity areas. So, in areas where people need the service most, it can be rural areas, maybe it will cost more because you got more people connecting to it. But then again, you got fewer people in those areas. So I don't know how that works. I don't know what's going to be more congested. It may have to do with whether they have enough satellites in an area. Maybe prices can come down if they can launch more satellites and get more bandwidth. But right now, it's fairly hefty charge, $120 a month or $90 again if you're in a excess capacity area. But excess capacity areas could get filled up as they add more customers. So I'm assuming that some of these $90 people could wind up paying $120 if the satellites get congested. Starlink's early user terminals cost about $3,000 to produce, but SpaceX cut its design cost to under $1,500 by early 2021. So it could be that they've dropped in price since then as well, maybe due to some volume and maybe some other, again, design changes. But $1,500 is a big difference between that and $400. Amazon targets late 2024, so it's going to be the end of next year. It doesn't sound like early next year. Amazon said its first production satellites will launch in the first half of 2024. Told the FCC in 2020 that it plans to offer broadband after launching 578 satellites. So they'll have some limited service with 570 satellites in orbit in probably limited areas. That's not going to be, I wouldn't think, throughout the whole world because they are at a same distance from the Earth as Starlink. So they're going to need a lot of satellites to be able to provide service. Amazon has FCC approval to launch 3,236 satellites. In April 2022, Amazon announced deals for 83 launches over 5 years using Arianespace and Jeff Bezos-owned Blue Origin and United Launch Alliance. Amazon plans satellite orbits between 590 and 630 kilometers, so that's about 360 to 400 miles. And Starlink is about 340 miles. So Starlink is very close, a little bit lower in orbit, but so these are going to have similar latency from that perspective. Starlink has about 3,750 satellites in orbit, but speeds have slowed as more users sign up. In much of the U.S., Starlink residential service is subject to a waiting list, despite SpaceX reporting to the FCC that it's available virtually everywhere. So there may be places where they don't have even enough capacity to take on new customers. And yeah, there was a complaint because the FCC broadband maps, they show Starlink's available everywhere when people will call and say, hey, I can't get it. So what Starlink came back and said was, well, we put that on there because we can provide that service to certain customers, like RV customers, for example. If somebody's traveling in their RV, they can get the service that way. So that's a little bit misleading. So I'm not sure where that's going to fall out. SpaceX recently launched its first batch of 21 second-gen satellites, saying they will provide 4 times as much capacity as earlier models. So that's going to help them, obviously, as they're going to be launching more satellites. They can't launch as many. They get these in orbit, and they're going to be able to provide as many as at a time, I should say. But they're going to be able to provide much more bandwidth. The FCC recently gave SpaceX approval to launch 75 of its 30,000 planned second-gen satellites. Right now, SpaceX has been talking about 12,000. But they really want to get up to, you see here, 30,000. I've heard 36,000. I've heard 42,000 that they want to get up in space. So I don't know if Amazon eventually is planning on that many, or if they feel like they have technology where they can operate with fewer satellites. SpaceX also plans to test satellite to cellular service with T-Mobile this year. So that's something that they announced with T-Mobile. That's not going to be where, you'd be able to get satellite service on your phone as that being your primary service. That's more like if you're in the middle of the desert and suddenly there's no cell service, then you can get a limited amount of service out through the satellite onto the T-Mobile network. So it's limited bandwidth, but it does allow you to be not completely disconnected if you're in an area and hiking in the mountains where there's no service or something like that. Then you can get access and be able to get out a text message and maybe very, very limited data-wise, but you could at least get messages out and maybe be able to get somebody to rescue you if you have a situation like that. So that will be a nice service. So that's kind of what's going on with Kuiper. This will be interesting to see the competition with Starlink, as well as, again, this will be another competitor for broadband service if they have this lower speed. I mean, some people may be fine with 100 megabits per second if they can get a cheaper cost. Let's say they might get that over Starlink if Starlink doesn't offer something similar. Starlink, for right now, for some reason, is not offering the Affordable Connectivity Program. They could do that. I understand why they can't offer a $30 package. You don't have to. In order to participate in ACP, you don't need to provide a low cost, like a $30 package where somebody can get it for free, but they could offer their regular plan and give somebody $30 off of that, and that would help somebody at least be able to get $30 closer to affording that service. So I'm not sure whether they're not doing that. I don't know if Amazon will or not. I would recommend anybody do that since it's available right now. We don't know how long the ACP is going to be available, but they really should be making that available to lower income customers, so at least they can get $30 closer to that. If they can't get broadband anywhere right now, they might be willing to do that with a $30 discount. So a few other things. I linked to this and I linked to a few of these other things in the video description. So here is the announcement from a couple of days ago from Amazon. So you can see it basically covers the same information, but you'll get it in their announcement. Then there's also this article back from 2020 that talks about their phased array antenna. The three antennas we talked about today, but it talks specifically about the technology of the phased array antenna. And Starlink has something similar to this. I don't know what's different as far as the technology that Amazon's using to maybe make it smaller, but they mentioned a little bit of that in here. But phased array antenna is basically, it uses electronics rather than having to have a physical motor to move the antenna around. It uses electronics in order to guide the signals in certain directions, so it can track the satellites without having to move the dish, or I don't know if the dish if it's square, but without having to move the customer terminal. And then also here is again, this is also just from the other day. This is everything you need to know about Project Kuiper. This is a little. I think this is a different. Yeah, this is the first look, and this is a little FAQ, I believe. Wait a minute. Yeah, here it is. I thought there was a little thing on the side here where you can click on it. Maybe it's because I have everything expanded here really big so you can read it. But this is an FAQ. And I think if I didn't have it expanded, you could click down and click on these one at a time. But you can see the different questions about, what technologies it uses, how many satellites will they have, and you can see the number that they'll have here. What's low Earth orbit satellite? It gives a description of that. So that's also linked description there. So I seem to be on my screen stuck right here. So I don't know if you can still hear me, but my image on my screen right at the moment is frozen. So, now it's not frozen. So I'm not sure if I was frozen, my video was frozen or not. But thanks for joining me. If this was interesting, if you give me a thumbs up on the video, I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button. There's a little bell next to it. Click that to be notified when I'm live. I appreciate you joining me today. I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.